Hello and good afternoon to this webinar about supply chain management. One of the things that we also have focus on when participating in the DTC program. And with me today, we have our tech maestro, Morten, who will give you a short introduction to how we work with supply chain here in Danish Tech Channels. Will you start, Morten?
Yes, no problem. All right, everyone, welcome to this webinar about supply chain management, how we deal with supply chain management within the Danish Tech Challenge program. I'll go through some of the main topics that we will be working on during the Danish Tech Challenge. First, I'd just like to give a short introduction about myself. My name is Morten Mogensen. I'm an employee in Beer. Then I'm also chairman of the board, and I also have a role as a product development director for another company. To start with, I did a startup myself, Butchers and Bicycles, which were started in 2010, quite some time ago. We were two guys, a co-founder and me, starting it up. We are developing and now producing three-wheel cargo bikes, electric cargo bikes that our customer loves. We are in more than 50 different countries, 150 different dealers around the world, from USA to Germany and Australia and stuff like this. We have been rewarded for a number of different things. For example, the Danish Design Award. We are finalists for 2020. We have been winning some German tests, and we got a cycle award in 2017. So it's a quite successful product. I have been working from first sketch on this product and then developing it for 3 years, setting up production, running production in Denmark, in Sweden, in Asia, Taiwan, China. So I've been doing a lot of stuff myself in relation to supply chain management. Today I'm employed in Beer Engineering. I'm also working with NoFred. I have been working previously with Jabra, did a lot of design for them. I have been working for Vestas for quite some time, still doing it on a regular basis. I have more than 10 patents at Vestas, 2 at Butchers and Bicycles. So I'm quite experienced within the development thing. Today we'll be talking about supply chain management. We'll be talking about 7 different topics, headlines. We're talking about supply chain impacts. What are the impacts for supply chain? We'll be talking about supply chain overview, strategy, talking about product overview with costs. More into detail with the different products. We'll be talking about cost targets. That's quite important when doing a startup and you want to make some money on the stuff you are developing. Then we'll be talking a little about the product development cash flow, investments, and when is it paid back and stuff like this. And finally, we'll be talking about the supply chain versus the business model. So how does this look when you have a product you need to purchase and you need to sell it, and preferably at some point make a profit as well. So that's, I guess, quite important. But the basic about this supply chain is that we want to accelerate you guys being at Danish Tech Challenge in being able to get to market as fast as possible. The first thing we'll go through is the supply.
Can I just interrupt for
Yes.
a short minute? If you have any question, use the Q&A and we will take the questions during the presentation. Please do not use the chat box, but use the Q&A. Thank you.
And Christina, you will just ask the questions along the way if they fit in, or else we will take them in the end. You decide this. You can interrupt at any time.
Yes, I will do so.
Perfect. All right. So the first thing we want to discuss is about supply chain impacts. Why is supply chain important for me? Why do I need a supply chain? Well, the supply chain relates to a number of different things. For example, funding. How much funding do you need to apply for? It also depends on how you set up your supply chain. It's about the business model. It's about sales. What kind of prices can you actually get from the product, depending on how much you can buy it for. And of course, it's also relating to product development, how to set up a supply chain, for example, in Asia and China, should you use injection molds, or what should you do? It's also about like investments, budgets, cash flow, revenue goals, profit goals. How many employees do you need to have? Do you need to set up a production facility yourself? What are the cost prices? How do they look over time, etc. So this is some of the things that's impacting from supply chain to different areas. The first thing we'll be talking about is supply chain overview and strategy. And this is super important. This is just a picture I found on the internet. It actually doesn't matter exactly what it shows, but it's just, the point is here, you need to be able to show how does the value stream look like from you have a supplier that's supplying a product until it reaches different customers all over the world, depending on where you're situated. So where are the different steps going in between? And of course, starting out, it's easy to do like a simple version, but depending on how you make your setup, this is super critical to get an understanding of where can we help you guys to move it forward along this. Should we collect some things at some suppliers, or what does it look like? So how, if you map this one out, try to figure out how are you mapping these kind of steps from single components until the final step. Are you assembling yourself? Do you have someone else to assemble for you? The guys producing the components, are they also doing the assembly? Or what are the different steps? Does some part come from China? Do some parts come from Denmark? Do you assemble in Denmark? Do you assemble somewhere else? Do you have a warehouse in, for example, US, Australia, Germany, and maybe the East? Or what does it look like? So these kind of factors are super important. And you can always build this overview out with different numbers and stuff like this. For example, the different customers. Do you have the main market in the US? You have a smaller market somewhere else. It also helps you guys to plan, for example, where to put a assembly factory, where to put the other factory. Doesn't make any sense to do it in one part of the world or the other one. But first, when you apply or get into the Danish Tech Chance, this is some of the first thing we'll be looking at. Maybe you don't have the final answer already, but we'll be helping you guys to figure out what kind of steps are important to illustrate when doing this kind of things. It will probably also change along the DTC program from start to the end. So this is super important. And also this here could also look different over time. So for example, strategy-wise, you can say that for the first 100, for example, it looks like this. It's super complex. You have 50 different suppliers and you need to assemble everything on your desk back home. But next step, strategy-wise, would be to have, for example, a box supplier that supplies everything. One item number, one purchase from one supplier, assemble everything, but that's along the way. So this mapping here will and could look different over time as well. And what is the strategy there? Do we have some ideas about where to move forward in that matter? So this is one of the things we'll be looking at as well. If you guys weren't at the product development webinar, the roadmap overview is also one of the important factors in relation to the supply chain setup. So that means that if you have a number of products in your roadmap, for example, here, you have product 1, you have product 2, and you have product 3 along the way. So there is some basic information that's important to know when you're trying to manage a supply chain setup. So that's, for example, what is your retail price, recommended retail price? For example, here, product 1, selling at 1,000 kroner at the shop. Your cost price when you purchase it is 100 kroner. Delivered year 1, 1,000, year 2, 2,000, year 3, 4,000. This is important numbers to, in the beginning, guess, estimate, stuff like this, because you're starting to set up a production. That means that in year 1, if you need to produce 1,000 pieces, maybe you need to order them 1 year ahead. So you need to decide, maybe it's a guess, maybe this is what you can afford, but 1,000 pieces. And the same with product 2. What are the recommended resale price? What are the cost price? What are the pieces delivered in the different years? Because this helps your organization to find out how to deal with these kind of things. What kind of suppliers do I need? Do I need to go to China directly? Do I need to build injection molds from the beginning? If your year 1, for example, is 5 pieces only, maybe you won't buy a injection molded machine. But if it's 1,000, maybe 10,000, maybe then for sure, definitely you want if you have plastic parts and stuff like this. So these kind of basic informations, they are super important when you start out the Danish Tech Challenge program. Also, if you don't start out the Danish Tech Challenge program. But these are important informations when you're starting to plan for a supply chain setup. Next step in relation to this, here the example is product 1. So what are the strategy for reaching the cost price of 100 kroner for this piece here? This starts out with a BOM, a bill of material. For example, this lamp here has a number of different lines. Maybe it has 50 lines of different components. So what does the BOM look like? And on the right side, you can see there is a BOM list, and you can put it into different overall categories. For example, electronics and hardwares, it's like 30 kroner. Maybe mechanical is 60 kroner. Packaging and manual is 10 kroner. And if you dig one step deeper, then you will see the BOM as on the right side. Say, okay, this first box is listed for electronics. It's for 30 kroner, and it has 10 different lines, and they are spread out in this way. So in this matter, you're able to get a fast overview and say, okay, this is your full BOM, and this is the way it's cut into pieces, and you can always go into details and look at it. It's also to look about the production setup. Should you have a box supplier? A box supplier, if you don't know that, that's like you have one item number for one product. So that means that if I, for example, have my iPhone here, this is, when you order it, you have one item number. You order it from one supplier and it comes within the package. This is, of course, the easiest way to do it, but setup wise, it will probably be the most complicated way. So maybe there is a strategy of this is where we want to go, but we will go there within 2 or 3 years or something like this. But you need to consider it along the way. What is the strategy for moving there and how to get there? It could be that you have production now in Denmark, the price is higher, and then afterwards in China. So cost target, it's important.
Morten?
Yes?
Sorry, I interrupt you.
Yeah, no problem, anytime.
Question, where in this process would you include the price of employee salary?
Of what?
Of salary.
Yeah. Okay, so salary could be different things. So when you say salary, I would guess it's for assembly. Like you have product development, that's like one box, and then you have like operational, that's another box. So when you say salary, there will be assembly salary, and you will need to put that in your BOM as well. Depends on what kind of system you're running and stuff like this, but it's good to illustrate that. For example, if you have a product like this or something else, then if it takes 10 hours to assemble and you have an assembly price of 500 kroner per hour, so that's quite a high number. So of course you need to put it here as well. In this setup, you have electronics, mechanical, packing, and in manuals. You could have another one called assembly labor. That's normal to put it there as well. So if I were doing it, I would put it there as well. And I would put tax as well. So if you, for example, produce it in China, import it to Denmark, you have a 5% tax for importing, I would put it there as well, so you can have the full overview of the total bump. Yep. Any other questions? Just let me know.
Yes, we have one more.
Yeah.
And what about shipping cost from the producer of the parts to where you are eventually assembling your product?
Yes, that's a good question as well. I would list all the costs relating to this here. So you have a landed cost price in your warehouse. That means that when you receive the product in your warehouse, for example, this lamp here, when you have it in your warehouse, I would have the price as a landed price. That means including tax, including shipping, including assembly, including everything, because this also is important information in you to decide where to produce the parts. Because maybe it's more expensive to produce it in Denmark, but you don't have to pay tax, the transportation is lower, and stuff like this. So when you put it into a sheet like this, then it's easy to get an overview what to choose. And the more data you have about it, the more prices you have, the easier it is also to evaluate and see which direction should I go. So normally you work with landed cost in your warehouse for your product, which include shipping and tax and all the different stuffs in between. Cost target wise, this is again, the example is the product one. You have a target price of 100 kroners. It will probably, when you have a development product, it will probably take some steps to reach that. First, you will do a prototype. That's actually the first verified cost that you have. So in this case, it's just an example. You have a prototype cost and it's verified and you build it and you have it in your hand and you paid 4,000 kroners for this. So this is the first check saying this is verified, it can be produced, we have it on stock, maybe the price is high, but then you go into first batch production and then you will say, okay, then we can produce it at 1,800 kroners. It will be produced in Denmark. It will be produced next door. Maybe the way of producing it is different from when you are getting your target at 100 kroners. And then maybe you'll have a step again where you will reach 900 and then you have a step at 100. This is just examples. Maybe you will hit the first target at 100 at first production. But it's just a matter of trying to analyze and trying to plan your way out of reaching this 100. There could be some steps along the way to do that. And normally you would have your bill of material like you have on the right top side saying that you have yellow prices, which is 4,000, then you have the Turkish prices, which is 1,800, and then you will end up with your target at 100 kroners. What does that look on a component level? That could also be important information into reaching it. In relation to this also, there is something about the product development cash flow, and this also means the way of setting up a supply chain. You have a break-even time. That means that the money you put into the project and the investment you put into is paid off at a certain point. And this is important in relation to, for example, funding and how much investment should you get. And the supply chain here is important because if you have a product that, for example, needs injection molding parts, you need to invest in tooling for setting up a production that can produce 4,000 pieces a year. And maybe you have a price of, you have a development price, maybe it's like 1 million, but then maybe you have a development or a mold price for 1.5 million. And this is, of course, super important when you have this kind of development cash flow, that you know what kind of investments do you meet along the way. When you need to set up a supply chain, what kind of costs will come into the funding equation. And this is super important when you start to ask for funding. it's also one of the difficult things to look in the future and see what kind of cost will I actually have, because I cannot have the right cost for these injection molds, for example, before I have the finished product. But then you need to have some assumption and say, okay, we know that, okay, in the beginning it's on a weak level, but it will be more and more solid when you come along, and you can adjust it along the way. So you know what kind of funding situation you're looking into. What is your final investment pool enabled to be able to set up the production in the right way. So it's about investments in molds, in production facilities. Do you need production equipment? Do you need to invest in that? It's about the budgets and the cash flow, revenues, profit, number of employees. For example, if you do assembly yourself, how many people do you need to have for assembling 4,000 products, for example, the first year? How much space do you need? Do you need a big warehouse? Can you do it in your office? What kind of financial impacts does this have? It's also about the cost prices. Do we have 4,000 kroner in cost price in the beginning? How to deal with that? Do you need funding for also reaching the right cost prices? It's about development time. How long time does it take for you to develop it before you have the product in the market? And this is some of the things that's easy to say, put in your plan and say, okay, mass production we have in Q4 2020. If you come into Danish Tech Challenge program and you say that, then I will be asking you guys a question about, okay, I understand you want to have mass production ready Q4 2020. Let's just try to calculate the way back. You receive them in your warehouse there. Okay, where are they produced? They're produced in China. It takes 5 weeks of transportation. Then it's like, do you have injection mold? Yes, we have injection molds. Okay, then you probably need 6 weeks of producing these molds. Okay, that's 6 weeks more. And then you need to run the mold. That's 3 weeks more. And all these kind of steps will be helping you guys to look into this in order to come with a right estimation of when does your products reach your warehouse and are ready to ship out. So this is some of the things we'll be looking at in relation to the cash flow of this, the investment, the setup of the different supply chain combined with the development time.
Morten?
Yeah.
You have another question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I do not see litigation costs or costs related to delays on parts, production side, malfunctioning, poor quality, etc. Is litigation a big burden in supply chains? And what about their costs?
Yeah, it's a good question. And you can say that this thing showing today is like a simplified version of a supply chain setup. Of course, there are many factors included in a supply chain setup, and of course, this is not the only factors that's valid for this clear. So, depending on what kind of products you do, what kind of complexity, what type of products, software, hardware, is there mechanical stuff, or what kind of? It all depends on the setup that you have, but it is more complicated than this, and we can always talk about all these kind of factors along the way, depending on the type of product that you do. All right. The last point we're going to talk a little about is the supply chain versus the business model. So that means that the value stream, where does it? You're buying some stuff at a certain price. You're selling it at a higher price, and if you have more parts in the business model way, then you need to add these here as well. But basically, you are purchasing a product at, for example, 100 kroner, and you're selling it at retail at, for example, 1,000 kroner. So what's important here about the supply chain relating to the business model is there could be some strategy in doing a setup of a production. For example, if you are selling it through a distributor and they are selling it to a number of different retailers, that's a more expensive part of the business model. So this you can take into consideration when doing your business model, is that for beginning, the first batch production, if this example is 1,800, that means that if you're selling it to a distributor, then you can see here that you're selling it with almost the same price as you're paying. That means you have a almost equal cash flow. That means you don't have a positive cash flow. You don't make any money for this. So for example, for a first production batch, you could say that we are selling it to the retailers directly, because then we would still have a reasonable positive cash flow for this. And then you can say that when we go into the second step of production, when we, for example, change to a supplier in Poland or in China or somewhere else, and you can have it as a landed cost for 900 kroner, then you can say, then we would open for distributors. So this is important when you're talking business model with Jan, how to deal with this in relation to the cost targets that you're reaching. And this is also some of the focus we will have during the DTC program. What are the different steps within reaching these targets to be able to sell it at a certain point? You could also say that, okay, it's important to build up the distributor network from the beginning, but then you just need to be aware that you need to maybe have funding also for producing, maybe let's say the first 2,000 pieces. Maybe you will actually use more money that you actually make. But it's just important to be aware of these points when you're doing your strategy, so you don't get any surprises along the way. So this is basically it about the supply chain. This is some of the features that factors that we will go through within the Danish Tech Challenge program. This is of course simplified. It's just a short presentation of some of the basic stuff. But the normal way we'll go through this is we will have, of course, one-to-one with each company and find out where are you in the process, what kind of strategy do you have. If you don't have one, how could we help you guys to set up a strategy for reaching a market at some point. Maybe you say that we will not hit the market before 1 or 2 years, but then we will help you guys with finding out what kind of strategy should it be, what are the different factors in between when going towards a market launch. So if you have any questions, please ask them, and we will try to answer them as good as we can.
Yes.
Do we have any, Christina?
No, there are any question. I mean, I could ask about what about the suppliers, and do you have any connections or anything in our network that we can benefit of?
Yeah, I mean, we have, of course, we already, me myself, I have worked with a number of different suppliers, both for injection molding, for electronics, for mechanical production and stuff like this, both in China and in Europe and stuff like this. And we have partners within also the Future Box and the Danish Tech Challenge that can help us with these kind of matters. And also when you're talking about, for example, supplier contracts and something like this, NDAs, we also have, and this is also important for the supply chain management, to have the right contracts with your suppliers. So when you, for example, say that, okay, I can produce my product at 100 kroner, then I'll ask, okay, how fast can you do it? So what is your lead times? Do you have any agreements with them? Do they sign off and saying, when you put an order, then you know it, that they have a max lead time of 3 months or 3 weeks or how long time it is. So these kind of factors we also have within the Danish Tech Challenge program, and we can help you guys with that as well.
Thank you, Morten.
So now you know all about supply chain, Christina?
Yeah. So exciting. Really, yeah. It's so great. I hope that this webinar was of value to you and gave you a bit of an introduction to how we work with supply chain in Danish Tech Channels. Yeah, I will send out the presentation later today so that you have them here with me, here with you. Could you go to the next slide, please, Mona?
No problem.
Then I can say a little bit about the deadline. It's on Sunday. Just send in your application right now. It takes only 5 minutes, so it's not when you go to use an hour or 2 hours. Just send in right now. But as I said, the deadline is on May 10th on Sunday. And then I can tell you a little bit about our next webinar. We have one already on Thursday from 3 o'clock. It's about the health packaging that Vækstfonden is offering. It's together with, of course, Vækstfonden and KPMG, where they will go through the things that especially the startups can benefit of. I hope that you will join, and I will send the link to you together with the presentation, and I will also send you a separately mail about the webinar. I can see that we have some questions. No, it's only thank you for the webinar, but it was a pleasure to be here again, and hopefully we will see some of you soon for the jury selection. So as I said, sign up now, 5 minutes, all it takes, and then we can start working with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. See you.
See you.